This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Turkish President Recep Erdogan declares Hagia Sophia, once Christianity's largest church, a mosque. And he promises to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque here in Jerusalem. Plus, Israel battles both a second wave of COVID-19 and social protests throughout the country. And Pat Robertson explains his lifelong commitment to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Turkey's President Recep Erdogan says the famed Hagia Sophia will open for Muslim prayers on Friday, July 24th, right after he approved turning the UN World Heritage Site into a mosque. The move is another sign of Erdogan's determination to expand his influence in the Muslim world. Some fear it also raises the threat to Israel, the Middle East, and even NATO. Moments after President Erdogan's controversial decision, the Muslim call to prayer sounded from Hagia Sophia. Erdogan made his decision despite objections from the U.S., Russia, UN, and the Russian and Greek Orthodox churches. Hagia Sophia was once the seat of the Eastern Orthodox Church.
The reaction of the Orthodox community was ignored. For the Orthodox Church, Hagia Sophia is as important as St. Peter's Basilica in Rome for Catholics. The church was built in the 6th century and was devoted to Christ, the Savior. For us, it has been and will always remain the church devoted to Christ.
Once the largest church in Christendom, the Hagia Sophia is a coveted symbol. It was first converted into a mosque well over 500 years ago during the Islamic Ottoman Empire, then turned into a museum by Kemal Ataturk, the founder of modern-day Turkey.
The 1934 decision to turn Hagia Sophia into a museum was a way of signaling that Turkey was moving from the Ottoman era of sectarianism and hierarchies to a secular republic of equal citizens. And now with this move, Erdogan is once again asserting Islamist supremacism and domination on Turkey's ethnic and religious minorities.
But Erdogan's vision has always been more ambitious than controlling his country. In a Facebook post, he said, "The revival of the Hagia Sophia is a sign towards the return of freedom to the Al-Aqsa Mosque here in Jerusalem." In the Arabic Facebook post, he also said the resurrection of Hagia Sophia is a greeting from our heart to all cities, from Bukhara to Andalusia. Andalusia is modern-day Spain, and Bukhara is in modern-day Uzbekistan. Both are references to the Islamic dream of reclaiming lands once under the rule of Islam. And it all begins with Turkey.
This is just one among many steps he has taken and will continue to take to socially engineer Turkey into a majoritarian, authoritarian, and sectarian regime. And this will have consequences, repercussions beyond Turkey. In the Middle East, there are many other supremacists, other sectarian state and non-state actors who would like to impose their will on ethnic and religious minorities. So I would expect other forced conversions of religious minority heritage sites in the Middle East and beyond.
It's also a red flag to Turkey's Christians.
This, of course, is going to be disastrous for Turkey's dwindling Christian population. Overall, there seems to be an intimidation campaign to either scare away Turkey's Christians on the one hand and to reimpose a sectarian Sunni Muslim dominant ideology on the other.
Here in Israel, in the early days of the pandemic, the nation was hailed as a model in fighting COVID-19. But now a second wave is wreaking havoc, including skyrocketing unemployment and protests in the streets. In Jerusalem, several thousand demonstrators both rioted and protested the government's handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Just days ago, thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv to protest the government's lack of support for Israelis out of work.
We are not working already nearly 5 months, and unfortunately most of us have not received any compensations from the Israeli government. And this is really a tragedy. That's mean now you can feed your family and pay your employees after 5 months with zero income.
In an attempt to stop the economic bleeding, Prime Minister Netanyahu promised relief.
I directed the immediate establishment of a joint forum, roundtables, together with the self-employed and with the business owners, so that we can resolve the problems.
The economic problems are daunting. Israel is experiencing an unemployment rate of more than 20%, and one of its main industries, tourism, is among the hardest hit. You can see the evidence driving around Jerusalem, where dozens of tourist buses sit parked. Hotels remain closed, and many tourist shops are shuttered. So how did Israelis go from a shining example of handling COVID-19 in April to today? Some believe it's simply because Israelis didn't follow the 3 requirements for reopening: wearing face masks, maintaining social distance, and personal hygiene. Since then, daily cases have risen from just double digits to more than 1,000. The crisis has led to a shortage of the drug remdesivir and a threat of a nationwide strike by the nurses' union, who say they're overworked. One Israeli official said the country is one step from a full lockdown, while some hard-hit areas have been quarantined.
We respect those decisions because for us, a life is a life and it's not just another number, and we want to make sure that everybody's safe at home.
The government also sent mixed messages. For example, when the Knesset overruled the cabinet for its closures on pools and gyms. All this has led to a dramatic fall in the polls for Netanyahu. In April, 30% of Israelis were unhappy with his handling of the crisis. Now that poll has doubled to 61%. Meanwhile, on an optimistic note, United Airlines announced it will open a new route from Chicago to Tel Aviv starting this September. Up next, an alarming report on how the mullahs of the Islamic Republic are cracking down on the underground church in Iran. Recently, Iranian police arrested a number of Iran's underground church. CBN's George Thomas talked with Mike Ansari of BRADTV about those arrests and what's the state of believers in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Iran is experiencing an unprecedented revival in the midst of COVID-19. BRADTV sends the gospel message into Iran by TV and internet. The ministry reports it is recording 10 times more online salvations than this time last year. That's 3,000 Iranians coming to Christ every month since March. The large number of people leaving Islam, as you can imagine, is causing a backlash against the church inside the country. Here to tell us more about all of this is Mike Ansari, Director of Operations for BRADTV. So, Mike, tell us more about this unprecedented revival taking place in Iran in the midst of a global pandemic.
Since March of this year, most Iranians are practicing social distancing by staying at their homes. Government has increased their internet bandwidth to keep them at home. But as a result, many young Iranians are going online to research alternatives to what their government offers. We have seen a 10-fold increase in our online traffic coming from inside Iran to our chat and social media channels. We're registering around 3,000 professional decisions, personal decisions rather, by Iranian Muslims to leave Islam for Christianity during this revival. That's why we call this a pandemic of hope.
And when you talk about this, I mean, obviously, most people are hunkered down, they're staying at home, they're sheltering in place. But what is fueling this unprecedented growth where you have 3,000 Iranians every month since March coming to Jesus Christ? What's fueling it?
People are not happy with their government. They're disillusioned with Islam. They feel that Islam is bankrupt. They want a regime change. They have been very vocal about this for years. We noticed last November and December that there was a huge uprising in Iran, and it was crushed by Iranian government killing more than 1,500 of its citizens, to which they were never accountable to international community. So people in Iran are just not happy the way their economy is going, the way the government is robbing them of their natural resources and exporting Shiite Islam to the neighboring countries. So they just don't trust their government.
Why is this revival angering the Iranian regime?
Well, vast majority of Iran's population are finding their leaders to be corrupt and untrustworthy. Iranians have declared publicly that they don't want an Islamic Republic anymore. Iranian government will do anything to secure its longevity. This includes violence against its own citizens.
What actions specifically, Mike, is the government taking to stop the revival from happening?
A short time ago, Iran's Guardian Council has asked for some amendments to be made to a proposed parliamentary bill that threatens to facilitate the further repression of religious minorities. These are amendments to Articles 499 and 500 of Islamic Penal Code in Iran, such that those found guilty of what they call a deviant psychological manipulation or propaganda contrary to Islam, whether in real or virtual sphere, they can be labeled as sects and punished with imprisonment, flogging, fines, or even death penalty. In other words, according to this new ruling, the 3,000 Iranians who visited our website just last month and made a decision to leave Islam are subject to severe punishment. This is a major violation to people's right to freedom of expression and belief.
And obviously the regime realizes the influence not just of satellite television, which you guys are broadcasting on primarily, but they also see social media. They see the various platforms, Instagram, Facebook. Tell us about Christians who have been arrested. I hear there have been a number of them since March, since the pandemic began. Tell us about their plight.
George, absolutely. Since a few months ago, we've seen a major increase in the number of raids on people's homes and house churches. Dozens of Christian converts have been arrested in the last few weeks and charged with acting against national security by promoting Zionist Christianity. That's what the Iranian court is saying. One of those arrested and released on bail is a 36-year-old Sonia Sadeh, who's a sports coach who runs a women's gym in Western Tehran and belongs to a women's only house church known as Yekdelan or One Heart, which has dozens of Muslim middle-aged members. She was released on a bail of 500 million tomans, around $23,000, last Thursday after 9 days in detention.
How can we pray for the church in Iran?
The church in Iran is fighting for its survival. First and foremost, we are asking the international community to pray for Iran's church. Second, we are asking all the pastors and leaders across America and Canada to bring awareness to the plight of Iranian Christians at their churches. Third, at Heart for Iran and BRADTV, we are providing resources to Iran's underground church. If you want to partner with us, please do contact us on our website, heartforiran.com.
And what are the folks inside Iran, part of the underground church movement, what are they telling you about how they are dealing with this global pandemic and using this opportunity to share the hope of Jesus Christ to those who are feeling hopeless?
Well, the beautiful thing about Jesus is that Jesus is generous and Jesus is loving, and that's exactly what we see in the trend of Iranian Christians under severe persecution from their own government. They're turning around and turning the other cheek and going on the streets of Iran and helping the people who are under distress over a pandemic and people who are dealing with social crisis and social issues as a result of the pandemic. They're showing a spirit of generosity, love, and kindness in the face of persecution from their own leaders.
Coming up, CBN founder Pat Robertson shares his heart and history of standing with Israel and the Jewish people. For decades, CBN founder Pat Robertson has been a friend to Israel and stood with the Jewish people. He shares that history with Scott Ross when they talked about Robertson's just published memoirs, I Have Walked with the Living God.
Out of all these projects, the ministries, works, Regent University, Operation Blessing, ACLJ, Middle East Television.
Yeah.
You had an interview with Yitzhak Rabin, who was at that time Prime Minister.
Right.
And you asked him what you could do, what we could do as America for him. What did he say to you?
He looked at me and he said, be strong, be strong. That the thing he wanted, Yitzhak Rabin, and I was so touched by that. He said, be strong. And I went up to the Mount of Olives where our group was staying, and I was in the hotel overlooking the Dome of the Rock down there in Jerusalem, and I made a pledge that I and the ministries associated with me would stand for Israel regardless of what it took. And we've kept that over the years, and God has blessed, you know, I'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. And we have been champions for the Jewish people ever since. But I said, whatever it takes, you know, even if it's painful, and I'll do it.
Yeah, and subsequently you established Middle East television.
That's right.
But there was something God told you going into Israel.
Well, you know, it's again, it's in the book. But
yes, it is.
I was praying. I said, God, this is a big deal, and I don't want to, you know. And the Lord told me, He said, you know, Didi and I were praying, and He gave me the verse in Scripture, and it says, Lebanon shall be like a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be counted as a forest. And in that day, the deaf will hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind will be open. I said, this is it. The Lord showed me. That's what we ought to do. And I said, okay, God, I know, but if I go in here and we spend money and all of a sudden we get overrun and blown up, it's going to be very foolish, so I'll need more of a sign. And I said, all right, Lord, I don't like to ask you for something, but I want to ask you for, I'm going to put out what Gideon said was a fleece. I'm going to ask you, send me something of gold. And I waited and waited, and Didi went to our mailbox that nobody knew about, and here was a letter from a guy named Frank Folio, and he said, I have in my hand 24-karat gold pieces that were struck by Pablo Picasso. Phew. And, you know, I've got them. I'll sell you one. Well, I couldn't buy one, but then before long, he gave me one, and we still got it. It was 24-karat gold, confirmed by Paloma Picasso, that this is I mean, the Lord just didn't give me a crummy old Kruger ring. He gave me the 24-karat. That was the sign I'd asked for, and He gave it to me.
Yeah, and He also underscored it with this word to you. You've made mistakes in other parts of the world.
Yes.
When you go into Israel.
You don't make any mistake here.
Wow.
This is the land of the Bible. I was on a British European airline flying across the Mediterranean. It was a moonlit night, and I was going into Tel Aviv from London. And the Lord said, you're going into Israel, the land of the Bible, and all that other.
Here is this book. We've talked about maybe a little bit more the inside of Pat Robertson, more than just the externals. But this is, I read this a few times, and the stories are astounding. I mean, they really are. I heard some lady on television a few months ago said, God doesn't speak to people. She said it. And I said, lady, I'm so sorry. May hit you with a big brick. But God speaks to you, and it's all around us. We see it.
That's right.
This is what He's done, what He's doing. This is one book.
Right.
This should be a 10-part TV series or a movie or something. It's amazing.
There have been so many things, Scott.
I know.
This is our walk with the living God. But, you know, it's little vignettes over and over again. God is so creative, and there's so many wonderful things. And what I want out of this book, I want people to understand that God is real, and He'll answer their prayers. And this is a guidebook of how you can listen to Him and hear His voice. And when you get through, nobody can read this book and not believe in God.
Up next, Israeli researchers come up with a promising plan to stop COVID-19 in its tracks. On a promising note, could a simple drug on the market for decades successfully treat COVID-19? An Israeli research team believes so because of a significant breakthrough in understanding how the coronavirus reproduces in the lungs. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
These are human lung cells, and they have been infected with the new coronavirus.
Professor Yaakov Nachmias leads the Hebrew University research team that's discovered how a drug on the market since 1975 could possibly combat the pandemic.
Viruses are parasites. They can't replicate on their own. They're essentially a box of protein with a single strand of genetic material inside them. In order to make more viruses, they have to get inside human cells.
Nachmias showed CBN News a microscopic view of cells infected by COVID-19.
You see these tiny green spots are actually lipid droplets in the lung, and they're not supposed to be there at all. The red thing are essentially membranes. This is the actual factory that produces more viruses. And we have never seen anything like that before. You can actually see the cells are not doing very well.
After 3 months of intense research, Nachmias saw how the virus prevents the routine burning of carbohydrates in the lungs, causing fat to accumulate.
And one of the things that we found, together with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, is the fact that once it gets into the cells, it starts making the cells make new fat. Once we found that out, we could start screening drugs that may potentially block the virus. Not by targeting the virus itself, but by going after fat accumulation. So the virus needs this fat to grow and make new viruses. But a drug like fenofibrate can help the cells burn this fat. And then suddenly virus production stops.
Nachmias hopes clinical trials will begin soon.
If everything pans out and the clinical studies validate our results, it looks good. Everybody's crossing their fingers, and we hope that before the next flu season, we'll be able to bring this drug to the market.
Researchers here at Hebrew University say they hope to downgrade the threat of COVID-19 to that of the common cold. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that would be a great step forward for the whole world. We also want to take this time to congratulate Pat Robertson on his life story and salute him for how he has led CBN to stand with Israel and the Jewish people. As they say in Hebrew, kol hakavod, with great respect. Here at CBN News in Jerusalem, we're standing on the foundation you established many years ago. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time.